Some hearts are recognized long before their names are ever spoken. Emma Carter had spent 23 years trying to become smaller than the whispers that followed her. In the royal city of Silver Hollow, where every alpha walked with effortless confidence and every respected omega carried herself with quiet grace, Emma seemed destined to trip over her own feet before she ever reached the end of a hallway. She was the palace gardener's assistant, responsible for watering flowers, trimming hedges, and keeping the marble fountain in the moon courtyard sparkling before the annual moon festival. It was honest work, even if no one ever noticed who made the palace beautiful. The servants noticed her, though. They noticed every dropped bucket, every crooked stack of flower pots, every embarrassed apology that escaped her lips after another harmless mistake. They laughed because Emma always smiled through it, brushing dirt from her simple cream dress as though kindness alone could erase humiliation. Some called her unlucky, others called her hopeless. Emma simply believed tomorrow might finally be better than today. As sunrise painted the palace towers with soft shades of gold, musicians rehearsed beneath silk banners while merchants decorated the pathways with lanterns that would glow long after dusk. Noble families from every neighboring pack would soon arrive to celebrate the Moon Festival, the kingdom's grandest gathering of the year. Rumors traveled faster than the morning breeze. Everyone whispered that King Adrian Blackwood himself would attend with his 2 young pups after spending months away inspecting distant territories. Few had seen the royal family together in public since the Queen's passing years earlier. Emma tried not to think about kings or ceremonies. Her entire attention rested on the enormous white marble fountain standing proudly at the center of the courtyard. Crystal water danced through carved wolves beneath silver moonstone statues, catching the sunlight like scattered diamonds. If even one leaf floated across the surface before the guests arrived, the head steward would certainly blame her. She tightened her apron, lifted another heavy wooden bucket, and carefully climbed onto the smooth stone edge. "Just one more rinse," she whispered to herself, taking an extra cautious step. Around her, servants hurried past carrying flowers, polished silver, and colorful ribbons, too busy to notice the young omega balancing quietly above the shimmering water, completely unaware that before this festival ended, one ordinary moment would change not only her life, but the memory of everyone standing inside the royal courtyard. Emma steadied the bucket with both hands and slowly poured fresh water across the polished marble, watching tiny streams carry away the last scattered petals from the previous evening. A satisfied smile almost reached her face before the familiar sound of hurried footsteps echoed across the courtyard. "Watch where you are going this time," a sharp voice called. Emma turned just enough to see Lydia Hawthorne approaching with 3 palace attendants close behind her. Lydia had served inside the royal residence for years, and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone that she worked much closer to the nobility than ordinary servants ever would. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her dark hair pinned without a single strand out of place, and the confident lift of her chin seemed to demand admiration. Emma quickly stepped aside. "I am sorry if I am in your way," she said softly. Lydia glanced toward the fountain before letting out a quiet laugh. "You always seem to be in someone's way, Emma." The other attendants exchanged amused smiles but said nothing. Emma lowered her eyes and returned to her work, hoping silence would end the conversation. Instead, Lydia continued circling the fountain as inspectors from the royal household entered the courtyard to examine every decoration before the festival officially began. Servants straightened their uniforms. Gardeners trimmed the last loose branches. Musicians tuned their instruments beneath white canopies. Every movement carried nervous energy because everyone knew the royal family would arrive before noon. Emma focused on wiping the fountain's stone edge with a clean cloth. She repeated each motion carefully, counting every breath to keep herself calm. 3. It was easier than listening to whispers drifting through the courtyard. "Did you hear she dropped an entire crate of roses last month?" someone murmured nearby. "She nearly knocked over the dessert table during the spring banquet," another answered. "I cannot believe they still trust her with anything important." Emma pretended not to hear, although every word settled quietly inside her heart. She had grown used to people remembering her mistakes far more easily than her kindness. An elderly groundskeeper named Mr. Collins walked past carrying pruning shears and offered her a gentle smile. "Take your time, Miss Carter," he said warmly. "Flowers bloom best when nobody rushes them." Emma smiled back, grateful for the familiar encouragement. "Thank you, Mr. Collins." His simple words eased the tightness in her chest for a moment. Then another servant hurried by with an armful of silk banners, brushing Emma's shoulder just enough to make the damp cloth slip from her fingers. It landed inside the shallow water with a tiny splash. Several nearby workers chuckled. Emma bent quickly to retrieve it before anyone else noticed, leaning farther across the smooth marble than she probably should have. The fountain stones were still damp from hours of cleaning, but she believed she had enough balance to reach the floating cloth. Above her, bells began ringing from the palace tower. The festival guests had reached the front gates. Conversation stopped almost instantly as excitement swept through the courtyard. Noble families dressed in elegant shades of silver, navy, and forest green began entering beneath towering stone arches, while servants hurried to their assigned positions. Emma remained frozen on the fountain's edge, one hand stretched toward the drifting cloth, completely unaware that a single careless shift of weight was about to place every eye in the royal courtyard upon the one person who had always wished to remain invisible. Emma's fingertips brushed the floating cloth just as the polished marble betrayed her. Her worn shoes slipped without warning, and for one suspended heartbeat she tried to catch herself, arms reaching for anything solid. Instead, the heavy bucket tipped sideways, sending a sparkling curtain of water into the air before she lost her balance completely. A loud splash echoed across the courtyard, silencing hundreds of conversations at once. Cool water surrounded her as she disappeared beneath the fountain's crystal surface. It was only waist deep, but the shock left her frozen for a second. When she finally stood, soaked from head to toe, strands of chestnut hair clung to her cheeks, and droplets ran from the sleeves of her simple cream dress. The polished marble wolves continued pouring streams of water around her as though nothing unusual had happened. Then the laughter began. At first it came from only a few nearby guests. Then more voices joined until cheerful amusement rolled across the courtyard like a passing breeze. Some covered their smiles behind elegant fans while others openly pointed toward the embarrassed young Omega standing in the middle of the fountain. Emma lowered her head, wishing the clear water could somehow hide her from every pair of curious eyes. Only Emma could fall into a fountain she spent all morning cleaning, someone joked. Another nobleman chuckled softly. Perhaps the festival needed unexpected entertainment. Lydia folded her arms with a satisfied smile that she barely attempted to conceal. I warned everyone she would cause trouble before the royal family even arrived. Emma wanted to apologize to every person watching her, although she was not certain exactly what she had done beyond making a simple mistake. Her cheeks burned warmer than the summer sunlight. She carefully reached for the marble edge, hoping to climb out before attracting even more attention. Unfortunately, her wet shoes slipped again, forcing her to steady herself with both hands. More laughter followed. None of it sounded cruel enough to be called hatred, yet together it weighed heavily on her heart. Mr. Collins took one hesitant step forward as though he intended to help, but another steward quietly touched his arm and shook his head. Royal protocol discouraged unnecessary movement while important guests entered the palace grounds. Emma understood. She would simply have to manage alone. Taking a slow breath, she gathered her courage and tried once more to climb from the water. At that exact moment, the grand palace doors opened with quiet dignity. Every musician stopped playing. Every servant bowed. Every conversation vanished into complete silence. The arrival everyone had anticipated had finally come. Emma remained inside the fountain, completely unaware that all attention had shifted away from her embarrassment toward the figures approaching beneath the white stone archway. King Adrian Blackwood entered the courtyard with calm confidence, dressed in a midnight blue ceremonial coat embroidered with silver thread that caught the afternoon light. Beside him walked two young boys whose bright eyes immediately wandered across the lively festival instead of the waiting nobles. Ethan, the older of the brothers, suddenly stopped walking. Noah froze beside him. Their excited expressions changed into unmistakable surprise as both children stared directly toward the soaked Omega standing quietly among the dancing streams of water. Neither boy looked at the decorated banners, the assembled nobles, or the musicians waiting to perform. Their entire world seemed to narrow to one familiar face standing alone inside the fountain. For one endless second, the entire courtyard seemed to forget how to breathe. Emma finally looked up, following the sudden silence that had replaced the laughter. Her heart nearly stopped when she realized the Alpha King himself was standing less than 30 feet away. His calm silver eyes resting on the fountain where she stood dripping with embarrassment. She immediately lowered her gaze again. Of all the moments to make another foolish mistake, it had happened before the most respected family in the kingdom. Every lesson about royal etiquette raced through her mind at once. Servants were expected to remain composed, invisible, professional. She had accomplished none of those things. "I am so sorry," she whispered under her breath, although she was not certain anyone could hear her above the gentle sound of flowing water. Around the courtyard, nobles straightened their posture, expecting the king to continue toward the ceremonial platform. Instead, King Adrian remained perfectly still. His expression revealed almost nothing, yet those who knew him recognized that he never paused without reason. Lydia quietly smiled to herself, convinced the unfortunate Omega had finally crossed a line that could not be forgiven. Several palace officials exchanged uneasy glances. One steward stepped forward cautiously, preparing to order Emma away before she embarrassed the palace further. Before he could speak, a small voice broke the silence. "Father." It was Ethan. The 8-year-old prince had not taken his eyes off Emma since entering the courtyard. Noah reached for his older brother's sleeve, his face filled with excitement that made no sense to anyone watching. "It is her," Noah whispered with absolute certainty. Ethan nodded so quickly that a loose strand of golden brown hair fell across his forehead. "I told you she was real." Emma blinked in confusion. She had never spoken to the royal children before. At least she did not believe she had. The two boys looked at her as though they had just found someone they had searched for forever. King Adrian noticed the unmistakable change in his sons before anyone else did. Their shoulders had relaxed. Their anxious curiosity had become joyful recognition. It was an expression he had not seen from either child in years. He looked from Ethan to Noah, then quietly toward the young Omega standing inside the fountain. Something about her face stirred the faintest memory, but it remained just beyond reach. The palace guards waited for an order that never came. The musicians held their instruments without playing a single note. Hundreds of guests stood frozen beneath fluttering festival banners, uncertain whether they should continue watching the king or pretend nothing unusual was happening. Emma wished the marble beneath her feet would simply disappear. She carefully gathered the soaking fabric of her skirt, preparing to climb out once again before anyone needed to rescue her dignity. "Please excuse me," she murmured softly, mostly to herself. She placed one foot against the fountain's smooth edge and slowly reached upward. The moment her fingers touched the marble rim, Ethan's eyes widened with sudden determination. Without asking permission, without waiting for ceremony, and without caring that every noble family in the kingdom was watching, the young prince broke into a run. Noah laughed with pure excitement and raced after his brother, leaving a line of astonished royal guards reaching far too late as both boys sprinted directly toward the sparkling fountain. The distance between the palace entrance and the fountain could not have been more than 40 feet, yet to everyone watching, it seemed to vanish in an instant. "Your Highness!" one royal guard called in alarm, instinctively stepping forward. Ethan never slowed. Noah laughed with the carefree excitement only a child could possess, his polished shoes tapping rapidly across the marble courtyard as he raced beside his brother. Guests instinctively stepped aside, unable to understand what had captured the prince's attention so completely. Emma stared in disbelief. Surely they were running toward someone behind her. There had to be another explanation. She glanced over her shoulder. The fountain was empty except for herself and the dancing streams of crystal water. "They cannot possibly mean," she whispered, unable to finish the thought. Ethan reached the fountain first. Without the slightest hesitation, he climbed onto the smooth marble edge. A dozen voices cried out at once. "Prince Ethan, please be careful." "Your Highness." The boy simply smiled, looking directly at Emma with unmistakable warmth. "We found you," he said. Then before anyone could stop him, he jumped. Water splashed high into the air as the young prince landed beside her, laughing as though he had discovered the greatest surprise of the entire festival. Emma stood frozen, completely speechless. Noah arrived only a heartbeat later. He did not even pause to remove his ceremonial cape. "Wait for me." he shouted happily before hopping into the fountain with another joyful splash. The younger prince hurried through the shallow water until he reached Emma, wrapping both small arms around her waist with complete trust. "You really are here," Noah said, smiling up at her with shining blue eyes. Emma instinctively steadied him to keep him from slipping on the smooth stone floor. "Easy," she said gently, her voice filled with confusion more than concern. "The rocks are slippery." The words escaped naturally, almost like an old habit, and for a brief moment both boys looked at one another with enormous smiles. "See," Noah whispered excitedly. "She still says it exactly the same way." Ethan nodded eagerly. "I told you she would." Around the fountain, silence spread once again. But this silence felt entirely different from before. The laughter had disappeared. Every noble, servant, musician, and palace official watched the impossible scene unfold with growing astonishment. Lydia's confident smile slowly faded. She looked from Emma to the princes, unable to understand why the royal children behaved as though the clumsy Omega were someone precious. Mr. Collins quietly removed his hat, his weathered face softening with wonder. Even the palace guards hesitated, uncertain whether protocol allowed them to interrupt the obvious happiness of the young princes. Emma gently brushed damp hair away from Noah's forehead. "Your Highness," she said carefully, "I think perhaps you have mistaken me for someone else." Noah immediately shook his head. "No," Ethan answered before his brother could continue. "We never forgot your face." Emma searched their expressions, hoping some forgotten memory would appear. Yet she found only unfamiliar kindness reflected in two earnest young faces. She had never expected anyone, let alone the princes, to recognize her. As confusion settled over the courtyard, one pair of steady silver eyes never left the fountain. King Adrian watched his sons laughing beside the embarrassed young Omega, and for the first time in many years, he saw something even more remarkable than royal composure. He saw both of his children looking completely at peace. No one could remember a single moment when royal protocol had simply stopped existing, yet that was exactly what unfolded before the stunned crowd. King Adrian stood motionless for only a heartbeat longer, watching Ethan and Noah laugh together inside the fountain as though they had returned to a place they loved. His sons had smiled before, but never quite like this. Since losing their mother, genuine joy had become a rare and precious sight. Court tutors had tried to lift their spirits. Noble families had arranged celebrations. The finest storytellers, musicians, and healers from every neighboring territory had visited the palace. Nothing had lasted. Yet now, standing ankle-deep in cool fountain water beside an embarrassed palace servant, both boys looked happier than they had in years. Adrian slowly removed the silver ceremonial cloak resting across his shoulders and handed it to the nearest guard without taking his eyes off the fountain. "Your Majesty," the captain said cautiously, uncertain whether he should intervene. Adrian answered with only a small shake of his head. Then, to the astonishment of every person gathered beneath the festival banners, the Alpha King walked calmly toward the marble edge. Whispers immediately spread through the crowd. "What is he doing? Surely he is not." Lydia stared with widening eyes, unable to finish her sentence. Emma noticed him approaching and her heart began racing all over again. "Your Majesty, I am terribly sorry," she said quickly. "This entire situation is my fault. Please allow me to leave at once." Adrian reached the fountain and looked down at the three figures standing in the clear water. Ethan smiled brightly. "Father, we found her." Noah nodded enthusiastically. "We really found her." Adrian looked at Emma. She lowered her eyes immediately, unable to meet his steady gaze. Water continued dripping quietly from her sleeves while strands of damp hair framed her flushed face. She looked as though she wished nothing more than to disappear into the flowing water itself. Instead of answering immediately, Adrian stepped onto the marble edge. Gasps rippled across the courtyard. The palace steward instinctively raised a hand. "Your Majesty, the ceremony." His words faded unfinished. Adrian stepped forward. A gentle splash echoed through the courtyard as the Alpha King entered the shallow fountain beside his sons. No dramatic movement. No anger. No hesitation. He simply stood beside them as cool water circled around polished black boots that had never before touched anything less than spotless palace floors during an official ceremony. Emma blinked in complete disbelief. "Your Majesty," she whispered. Adrian offered a calm expression that carried neither judgment nor disappointment. Instead, he extended one steady hand toward her. "The stones are slippery," he said quietly. "Allow me to help you." Emma stared at the offered hand, uncertain whether she was dreaming. Moments earlier, the entire courtyard had laughed as she struggled alone. Now the king himself stood beside her as though helping her were the most natural thing in the world. She hesitated only briefly before placing her trembling hand into his. His grip was warm, steady, and unexpectedly gentle as he helped her regain firm footing. Around them, no one dared speak. Ethan looked proudly at Noah. "See," he whispered. "Father remembers too." Adrian heard the quiet words. They stirred something hidden deep within his memory, like sunlight beginning to reach the edge of a long-forgotten dawn. He looked once more at Emma's kind eyes, and although he still could not place the memory, he suddenly found himself wondering why her face felt strangely familiar. Emma carefully withdrew her hand, still unable to understand why the royal family was treating her with such unexpected kindness. Water shimmered around the four of them while the courtyard remained silent, as though even the wind had stopped to listen. Noah refused to let go of her sleeve. Ethan looked from his father to Emma with the hopeful excitement of someone waiting for an old promise to finally come true. "You really do not remember us, do you?" Ethan asked softly. Emma searched the young prince's face. His bright blue eyes carried warmth that felt strangely familiar, yet every memory she reached for slipped away like water through her fingers. She slowly shook her head. "I am sorry, Your Highness. I wish I did." Noah smiled anyway. "That is all right. We remembered enough for everyone." Several nobles exchanged puzzled glances. Lydia folded her arms tighter, growing more uncomfortable with every passing second. Nothing about this scene made sense anymore. The captain of the royal guard quietly approached the fountain but remained a respectful distance away. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "the welcoming ceremony is prepared whenever you wish." Adrian acknowledged him with a slight nod but did not move. His attention remained fixed on Emma as though searching for a forgotten chapter buried deep inside his own memories. Ethan finally looked toward the gathered crowd before speaking in a voice that carried farther than he intended. 3 summers ago, Noah and I wandered away from our writing lesson." A ripple of surprise spread through the nobles. Everyone remembered that frightening afternoon. The entire palace had searched for the missing princes until sunset. "We became lost in the eastern gardens," Ethan continued. "There was a terrible storm. We were frightened because we could not find Father or the guards." Noah nodded earnestly. Everybody was looking in the forest, but nobody thought we stayed near the old greenhouse. Emma listened politely, still unable to understand why they were telling her this story. Ethan smiled at her with quiet certainty. "Then someone found us." The words settled over the courtyard like gentle rain. Emma frowned slightly. A faint image stirred somewhere in the back of her mind. Dark clouds. Small frightened voices. 2 muddy little boys hiding beneath a broken stone arch while thunder echoed across the hills. She had been delivering fresh herbs to the palace kitchens that afternoon. She remembered seeing 2 children crying near the abandoned greenhouse. They had worn simple traveling cloaks without royal colors or family crests. Believing they were servants' children separated from their parents, she had stayed with them until the rain eased, singing softly while folding broad leaves into little boats that floated through puddles to make them laugh. When palace guards finally arrived, Emma had quietly slipped away before anyone could thank her because she still had work to finish. The memory returned so suddenly that her eyes widened. "The rain," she whispered almost to herself. Noah beamed with delight. "You remember?" Ethan laughed. Happily. "You told us that storms never lasted forever because flowers always needed rain before they could bloom again." Emma covered her mouth in astonishment. She had forgotten that ordinary afternoon almost as soon as it ended. To her, it had been nothing more than helping 2 frightened children feel safe. But as she looked into the joyful faces standing beside her, she realized those children had never forgotten a single word. King Adrian remained silent long after Ethan and Noah finished speaking. The courtyard waited with him. The memory his sons had carried so faithfully was now beginning to awaken inside his own mind. 3 summers earlier, the kingdom had celebrated a successful harvest, when an unexpected storm rolled across the valley. For nearly 2 terrifying hours, the entire royal guard had searched the eastern grounds after the young princes wandered away during a riding lesson. Adrian still remembered the fear that had settled into his heart, as every passing minute brought darker clouds and colder rain. When the boys were finally found, they were smiling instead of crying. They had spoken excitedly about a kind young woman who had stayed beside them until help arrived, making tiny leaf boats, singing gentle songs, and reminding them that brave hearts did not have to stop being kind. Adrian had ordered every steward to identify the mysterious servant who had comforted his children. No one ever found her. The reports claimed the young woman disappeared before anyone learned her name. Eventually the kingdom moved forward, but Ethan and Noah never stopped talking about the stranger who smelled like fresh flowers after the rain and smiled even when her own clothes were soaked. Emma lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she could barely understand. "I only stayed because they were frightened," she said quietly. "Any person would have done the same." Ethan shook his head. "No. Other people searched everywhere else. You stayed with us." Noah squeezed her hand gently. "You did not know who we were. You were just kind." Those simple words echoed across the silent courtyard with greater strength than any formal speech. Adrian looked around at the nobles who had laughed only minutes earlier when Emma struggled alone inside the fountain. Their expressions had changed completely. Some looked ashamed, others looked thoughtful. Even Lydia found herself unable to meet Emma's eyes. The Alpha King turned back toward the young Omega. "Miss Carter," he said in a calm voice that carried effortlessly through the courtyard, "my sons have spoken of you for 3 years. They remembered your kindness when they could have remembered only their fear. That is not something a father easily forgets." Emma blinked rapidly, fighting unexpected tears. She had spent years believing every small act of kindness disappeared unnoticed. She had never imagined that one ordinary afternoon could remain inside the hearts of 2 children long after she herself had forgotten it. Adrian offered a gentle smile that softened the quiet dignity of his face. "You believed your actions were small," he continued. "To my family they were not." Around them, the afternoon sunlight reflected across the fountain's clear water, transforming the gentle ripples into countless points of silver light. Ethan looked up at his father with hopeful eyes. Noah still refused to let go of Emma's hand. For the first time since entering the festival, Adrian no longer saw an embarrassed servant standing in wet clothes. He saw the quiet courage that had comforted 2 frightened little boys without expecting recognition, reward, or even thanks, and he realized the greatest treasures in a kingdom were often the ones that had been overlooked in plain sight. Emma stood quietly as the fountain water settled into gentle ripples around her feet. For the first time in many years, she did not feel invisible. She looked at Ethan and Noah, whose joyful smiles had never faded, then toward King Adrian, whose calm expression carried sincere gratitude instead of royal distance. Around them, the guests remained silent, each person witnessing a lesson no ceremony could have planned. Kindness, freely given and long forgotten by the one who offered it, had returned in the most unexpected way. Adrian slowly offered his arm toward the fountain's edge. "Come," he said gently. "The festival should begin with everyone standing together." Emma hesitated only a moment before accepting his invitation. As they stepped carefully onto the polished marble, Noah reached for one of her hands while Ethan naturally took the other. The simple gesture drew quiet smiles from many who had laughed only minutes before. Mr. Collins lowered his head with quiet pride, while several servants exchanged thoughtful glances, suddenly remembering every unnoticed act of kindness Emma had shown over the years. Lydia remained motionless, her expression softening as regret quietly replaced certainty. She realized that she had measured people by perfection, while the royal family had remembered compassion instead. Adrian looked across the courtyard before speaking in a voice that carried with effortless warmth. "A kingdom grows strong through courage, wisdom, and honor. But it endures because of ordinary kindness that expects nothing in return." No one applauded. The silence itself carried greater respect than applause ever could. Emma felt tears gather in her eyes, not from embarrassment this time, but from the overwhelming realization that even the smallest moments could leave lasting footprints in another person's life. She had believed she was simply comforting 2 frightened children during a rainy afternoon. Instead, She had given them a memory that became part of the family they would always be. The musicians slowly lifted their instruments once more, and gentle music drifted through the courtyard as sunlight shimmered across the fountain behind them. Ethan looked up at Emma with the same bright smile he had worn years before. "We knew we would find you again someday," he said. Emma laughed softly, her heart lighter than it had ever been. Together, the four of them walked toward the waiting festival, leaving behind a fountain that would forever remind everyone who witnessed that remarkable afternoon of one unforgettable truth. The greatest acts of love are often the quietest ones, and the hearts that change the world rarely realize they have done so until kindness finds its way home.